Hey, what's up everybody? It is Matt from Dagger Studios coming to you with another video about operating at night when you're playing Airsoft. Coming from a real steel background into Airsoft, I've been doing this for about 20 years and I love it. It's my happy place. But we're going to get into a couple of the things that completely and utterly can destroy your happiness while you're playing Airsoft. So I just got done playing at Rats in Rockingham, and it's a really cool place. Their venue is a school that they've converted into an Airsoft field. So you have a really cool mixture of woods, open terrain with obstacles like tanks and helicopters in the courtyard and outside, as well as the internals of this old elementary school for CQB. And it's cool. It's a great field. So they host a couple of night games every year, and I just got done with one, and it was awesome. Great time. But we're going to get into what can take away from your happiness when you're playing Airsoft at night, and the things that you need to really consider if you want to do this and have a better time. We'll talk about the things that you should have, the things that you need, and what happens when your equipment fails, because mine did. And it's so frustrating, and we'll get into that. But before we do, if you would, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell on our Dagger Studios channel on my YouTube page. It'd mean a lot, and it would really help us grow the channel, grow the page, so we can continue to bring you those hot takes. So getting into it, playing at Rats, this was my first night game in an extremely long time, and my first night game with Nods. And man, I've been playing Airsoft for 20 years. I did this real steel for the Marine Corps, and there's so much that I messed up. And this is why you play. This is why you do these practice rounds. This is why you understand, develop, and evolve your PCCs and PCIs, especially when you're starting to walk around in the dark, because it's a different ball game during the day. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that the night is a great equalizer without good equipment. And that's what happened to me. I got equalized very quickly. So we're going to get into it. I am running the Mayo Gang Gen 3 for the AR platform with a Ace Tech MK2 Predator suppressor / tracer unit, and then I am also running a Holy Warrior digital optic with a PEC 15 clone on a riser. You guys can probably see that right here, or at least a little bit of it. And this system worked great, except for the tracer unit. Man, you've really got to read that manual because it is not intuitive. The buttons are exceptionally tiny when you take it apart and you're trying to manipulate it. What the manual says for the visual feedbacks is not how it works on the actual device. And so that's a little screwy. It can really piss you off if you're trying to get this to work and operate before you play. I had to actually take the unit out of the suppressor housing and try to field expediently make it work, which took up about the first game I played. So that's really annoying. It's really hard to, by the way, a lot of these facilities will run these things very quickly, these games very quickly. So my advice is, if you're going to play during the day, you might need 30 minutes prep time for your PCCs and PCIs to get your AEG loaded, your GBB, whatever you got, and get it up and running and working, and that's cool. But at night, you've got a whole lot more of equipment that requires that it's pre-charged, pre-calibrated, set up correctly, dialed in, your equipment seated, your helmet is fitted correctly, everything is working, your NVGs have got their batteries and the calibrations and the settings, and there's just so much more that goes into playing at night. So I'd recommend like an hour and a half buffer for your PCCs and PCIs to get your equipment seated, and then you'll be ready to play, because it just takes longer to get all of this stuff operational and working for you to get into that first engagement. And I showed up like 30 minutes prior And that's my fault, that's my bad. But it cost me because I was not ready to go for that first round. And I had monster equipment failures while we were playing. Like I mentioned, my Predator 2 went down. That sucked. My PEC worked like a champ. This PEC clone is amazing. It worked perfectly. It worked flawlessly. And in fact, it was my workhorse when my NVG went down immediately. And we're going to get into that and why the particular NVG I have is, I would not recommend it for airsoft for one simple reason, and it's not what you think. So getting into this, get out there, getting situated, first round, ding, ding, here we go, ready, fight. Get out onto the field. I've never been to RATS, so it took a while to get acquainted with the field and the layouts and the flow, because every field has a different flow. Every field has different cadre, and they run things different paces, different rules, different unspoken rules, different styles, personalities. RATS is completely different than Extreme or Black Ops down in Fayetteville. It's just very different flow up there. So get out, trying to get into the flow, and NVGs go down. And let's get into it, because this is a critical component when you're trying to fight at night, right? Having nods is a great force multiplier. This is the Wild Game Plus, otherwise known as like the NVG 10 or the PVS 10. It's a digital device. And like I mentioned earlier, this thing didn't fail for the reason you think. The actual NVG, the digital NVG, is pretty solid. Having used real steel with PVS 14s under combat environments to trying to use this in an airsoft game, you're getting 60 to 80% out of what you'd get with a PVS 14. And that's a lot. That is a lot. The latency is low. The refresh rate on this is actually pretty high. The battery life is exceptional. The build quality on this is amazing, actually. It's pretty much all metal or CNC aluminum, I think. And your eye relief is pretty good. I prefer the flexi eye cuff that actually has the longer shape to actually cone over this part of your eye socket. But you can change your focus fairly well. But man, this mount is a killer. This is the Achilles heel of the PVS 10, which I think Gyoji or Gyobi it's what it's branded now, the Chinese brand. I got this when it was Wild Game Plus like 2 years ago. But this mount absolutely sucks, and it's going to fail on you, and it's going to piss you off. So it's 8 out of 10 for the optic, 0 out of 10 for the mount, and put that together, and I'm only going to give it a 2 out of 10, and that's not the right math, but that's just how much this mount sucks. It's an articulating mount. It's supposed to be 3-position, but it's really only 2, because you have to unlock the C-clamp to be able to manipulate this to get it in the proper position for eye relief. And eye relief absolutely sucks when you go ahead and you put this on your dome piece and you manipulate this optic down. When you're wearing eye pro, which you have to in airsoft, to get the proper eye relief with the digital display that's in there, good luck, Chuck, because man, it sucks. You can do it, you can make it work, but the problem is that digital screen that's in here, that's closer to the far end of this device, it's on the front end, not the back, means that this thing has to be right on your eye, basically, like right on, like almost touching your eyeball, to be able to see the entire field of view inside of that reticle on the screen. And if you don't have that, it starts to cone down the further you go out. And so you're losing field of view, and then you're starting to lose data points in your HUD. You can't see what your battery is at. You know, the field of view just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, which makes your ability for target acquisition and running and gunning, even simple things like walking, become a pain in the ass, because this mount will not provide proper eye relief when you're wearing eye pro. In addition, the part that actually connects, you might not be able to see it, but we'll try to get a close-up of it. The part that actually connects to the NVG is a C-clamp, so it looks like this. This is a massive design flaw. You have a ton of weight comparatively in your NVG unit to the pressure that you can apply with that C-clamp. And what that means is that the weight is always your C-clamp, and then this is your mounting device. The C-clamp is only milled for 50% coverage, kind of like that. It's really nasty. So the NVG is constantly wanting to roll in that clamp. And then because you only have 50% coverage, it's always slipping. Maybe if they had designed it for a 3/4 coverage, you could get a better grab, but you're still going to deal with that slipping issue because it's real slick metal on both the clamp and your NVG. So this was an extreme problem. Like first go out, this thing is failing. I can't get it to properly adjust the way you can with like a Wilcox or your standard early GWatt era NVG mounts. These things, tried and true, but you can't use this with that device. There's just no mounting points for it, and you can't use a Wilcox. And so the ease of use, dependability, durability, and trust that you have with this is out the window with this. And maybe you can see, but I've got a long dummy cord on here because you're gonna need it. This is gonna fail and it's gonna fall off and you're gonna lose your shit in the middle of a firefight or just walking around trying to figure out where you're at, and it's gone. So you should be dummy cording all these type of things, but this one in particular, you absolutely have to dummy cord it because you're gonna lose it dummy. And it's not a fun day looking for this gear. The particular game we were playing, it was 26 to 28 degrees. The whole entire field was covered in snow and ice. And the last thing you want to do is have to pop on a light to figure out where that piece of equipment is. And that's if you knew when you lost it. More than likely, you might not know the exact moment you lost it. And so you're going to be spending all of your game time trying to find your shit that just isn't working. It's not operational. It's not combat effective. Even in Airsoft, you would never trust this stuff in real life, but for Airsoft, this is completely combat ineffective and not worth your money. So do not spend your money on the PVS or the NVG-10 is all I'm trying to get at. That's the moral of the story. It's a cool device as a standalone monocular, or you can maybe mount that to something like a tripod or a monopod for post or an LPOP. But as far as actually using it on the individual warfighter, Waladeen it. Waladeen. Get it out of here because it's garbage. And that brings me to the other two pieces of NVG equipment that we are running. This is an old, and when I mean old, this is about 10 years old. This is an old analog Russian NVG commercial device. Let's see if we can get the model. The YK24G22WP. It's made in Russia. It says it's made in Russia. That's how I know that. But this thing was about 150 bucks off of Optic Planet when I got it 10 years ago. And it's still running and it's still working great. The problem with this device is it's standalone. It does not have mounting points that you can use with other types of mounts, whether it's the Wilcox or the old Marine Corps one. It just doesn't, it has screws, but the design does not make this compatible. And the offset for your eye doesn't make it compatible, but it is a dang good device for what it does. It has an illuminator, and for the money you spend for it, this was worth it. Again, you're not going to be mounting this on your helmet, but for an LPOP, for the COC, for quick observations, this device is not bad. It even has a little focus wheel up here on top and a focus wheel here at the bottom, so you can do a two position focus on it. Which brings me to the third piece of gear, which is this bad boy right here. So this is a digital monocular, And right now I've got it on a stand because, again, these two particular devices are not going to be for on the helmet mount. This is going to be for your LPOP, your COC, your in-field observation, quick observations. But you'll never guess where I got this from, and you probably can't guess how much I paid for it. No, I didn't get it on Amazon. I got it off of Temu for $10. And it was a real gamble, shot in the dark, said $10, let's go, I'll test her out. But buddy, I am absolutely thrilled with this Bino. Not only is it a really good NVG system, it also records, it has a laser pointer, and it has digital zoom. It's got and a really good illuminator. It's got everything you need for a monocular system that's digital NVG. And man, does this device, it's shocked the shit out of me. For $10, we're getting a good deal. Granted, China probably has all my information now, but they had it anyways with all the other stuff I've done in my life. So why not? $10, let's give it a roll. And the gamble paid off because this particular device is really, really cool. Comes with a nice little lanyard so you can just keep it slung, dangled, whatever. Keep it in your drop pouch. Worth it, absolutely worth it. So that's pretty cool. These three devices will get you through the game in the event that you're not actually spending the money on a good system. And when I say good system, what do we mean by a good NVG system for airsoft? Well, I'm not crazy, nor am I rich. So we're not talking about real still equivalencies or awesome, amazing analog systems or awesome and amazing thermal systems. We're talking about a good happy medium between a $300 price point, $400 price point, and a $5,000 price point, which I love to get my hands on an HLS 31 dual tube NVG and thermal. Love to give that a review, love to give that a try. That seems to be my target after I've looked at all the other reviews and narrowed this down. That seems to be the best combo. You're getting the best of both worlds, thermal and night vision. You're getting it in a dual tube setup. The mounts work with the Wilcox. It just looks like the right one to get. So we'll get there. But until then, what do, right? Well, you can suffer on the field and deal with these pain in the ass, cheap mounts. I won't call the digital night vision, the PVS 10 or NVG 10 a cheap thing because it works fairly well, but the mount's cheap, makes you combat ineffective. You can run around with your monocular, you can use your binos, but again, if you're, and these are only going to be good for static, tactical pauses. They're not gonna keep you in the fight, sustained fight, kinetic environment engagement through the target, but they'll work. And so what do? So what did I end up doing? Well, you kind of have to go a little old school and a little SOL. And what do I mean by that? So the first part of this, which is actually the second, is SOL. You're down. Your NVGs are down. You're down. You are now support because you are not kicking into the doors when your stuff doesn't work appropriately. So that's kind of more of the role that I took in that particular game, is moving into a support role with command and control, target acquisition, recognition, passing word, that kind of jazz. But there's also more of the old school method, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of SEAL, stop, look, listen, smell, but that tactical pause and giving your eyes about 10 to 20 minutes to adjust to the low light, no light settings will activate your internal biological night vision. I'm getting older, so it's getting worse, but it still is pretty good for you to be able to move around, operate, and identify threats as they start coming in. The old school method is not really a aggressive punch out, tip of the spear type of mentality. You have to shift into a combat hunter role. And more likely than not, it's going to involve you having to stop, look, listen, and smell often, because especially in that environment at Rats, it was snowy and icy. You can hear footstep crunches for a long distance, especially if the kinetic engagement is further away from you. So with that being said, you're stopping, you're looking, you're listening, you're smelling, you're engaging your senses, you're keeping your light discipline very high. That way you can react to these threats as they start to come in and press into you, rather than having an NVG and being able to press to the enemy. So using that particular old school tactic, I was able to run a couple more games, stay in the fight for a very long time with a low casualty radius, a low respawn number, a low respawn count, and practice some of these techniques that we learned in the infantry. Even though the equipment I want to use, the Gucci gear's down, everything's a training opportunity, and this is a training environment, so we're going to use our other skills. And just because you don't have NVGs yet doesn't mean that you can't be combat and effective. You are effective. You can be combat effective without NVGs. You just have to know where you are in the stick and what your role is as not having the gear that everybody else has. And so using the SEALs method, stop, look, listen, smell, it gives you an advantage over a lot of the other players, because even if they are running NVGs, especially if they're running NVGs or thermals, and for the guys who don't have NVGs, they're going to have a false sense of security in those nods. And the ones who don't have NVGs, they're going to be running and gunning and moving around, and they're probably not paying attention to their noise discipline, their light discipline, their silhouettes, their sound discipline from their weapon systems and their gear and everything else. So if you can switch into that combat hunter mindset, you can do some pretty cool work out there. And it's a good training opportunity. So use it, take advantage of it. And it's also pretty good to practice, even if you have nods, to practice SEALs with your nods on, simulate a failure of your nods or your PEC or any of the other systems that you need to operate at 100% at night. I know I'm harping on that, but this is how it's been done for hundreds of years, and it's worked. There's a reason why it's taught. There's a reason why it's so effective, because you let your enemy make the mistakes for you to capitalize and take advantage of. And all you have to do is just have a little bit of patience, and they will make a mistake, especially in these fast-paced airsoft games that are outside of the milsim events, where everybody's just running and gunning. You have 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You're just trying to get the objective, get the kills, whatever the case is. If you can just remove that sense of urgency from your body, from your brain, and focus on combat hunting and SEALs, you're gonna be a little bit more effective than you think you are. And there's a couple of other things that I was able to do that paired very nicely with the SEALs and combat hunter mentality, which is running the visible red laser off the PEC with the tracer unit. And that was my force multiplier, even though I didn't have NVGs. Having a visible red light with a tracer unit, having those tracer BBs, allowed me to still engage targets exceptionally effective and fast, even though I couldn't actually see the way I wanted to see, or had 100% certainty of where the enemy was. If you play a lot, you know that the enemy does not have a lot of these considerations in mind, so their noise and light discipline is garbage. They're running tracer units with 100% tracer BBs, which means that laser light that comes out, which is cool, I can just trace it right back to the point of origin, set up my red dot or my laser on that point, give it a 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 Mississippi, stop, look, listen for movement in the silhouette. You're burning through the darkness, sort of, to check for movement, And you'll see, you know, every now and then you might see a shadow of a head or a weapon system come out, poke out, hear it, bam, you've already got this position. The enemy doesn't know where you're at. You've already got your position dialed in, and now you're just timing them out. Bing, 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 running the gun on them. And I got a couple that way. So having the PEC workhorse, I preferably like to run a 50-50 mixture at the highest end of this for my tracer BBs to regular white BBs. Again, the reason is because it's a offensive and counter offensive mixture, meaning offensively, I can still trace my rounds as they're going out. I've also got my PEC dialed in to the bore sight, so I know that the ones I can't see are still going where I put that red dot, but the enemy can't just run that rope right back to me. And that is, it really kind of shook some people up, because it kind of feels like you're either running a tracer at 100% laser light show, or you don't have a tracer and you're not running it at 100%, you're running it at 0. But when you put that 50-50 mix in, it adds confusion, it adds noise, it adds a little bit of simulated battle chaos, where the decision-making capabilities of your adversary just go down just enough to maybe give you a tactical edge, an advantage over them. And so that's why I do it. I run a 50-50 mix, and it gives me a couple of milliseconds, maybe a couple of seconds, if I need to shoot, move, communicate to the next position or whatever the case is. I bought time to make a decision. And that decision is, do I stay, do I go, do I redo target acquisition, whatever the case is. I bought just a little bit of time having a 50-50 mix versus the laser light rope, which is cool. I love watching it. I love being in that environment and watching these streams go in and out. It's super cool. It was cool in theater in Afghanistan. Well, maybe cool is not the best word, because people are really dying, but it is an amazing spectacle when you watch this in real life. And that does get kind of simulated in Airsoft. So the feeling of that speculation is there. But in Airsoft, nobody's dying, so it's really cool to watch. But it's not as combat effective as it could be. You dial it down. There's a reason why the military doesn't shoot all tracers. You know, it's a 1-5, 1-8, 1-12, depending upon, you know, what weapon systems you're running and the environment and, you know, 14 other factors. But there's a reason why you do that, because, you know, if it's 1-6 or 1-12 or whatever the case is, you can dial in your shots, even if your NVGs go down or whatever the case. All the stuff that we just covered, there's a reason why it's not 100% laser light show. So you can simulate that in Airsoft. All I'm saying is that putting a ratio on your tracer BBs, whether it's a 50-50 mix, 25-75, whatever the case is, it'll give you a little bit of an edge. And that's pretty cool. So with all that being said, just a real quick recap. You've got to know your gear. You've got to make sure you have the right gear. You've got to give yourself plenty of time to do your PCCs and PCIs, to get your equipment seated and calibrated for the environment or the place that you're going to be playing, whether it's a temperature calibration, whether it's a geographical calibration, whether it's a physical calibration on your weapon system, your platform, your helmet, whatever the case is. You just give yourself a little bit of extra time. You'll really enjoy it. And practice your contingencies for when things break, go down, fail, fall off your face, or you don't have them. And that's where you can kick it old school and start activating things like Combat Hunter and stop, look, listen, and smell. It'll give you a great edge. You're going to get a better gameplay out of it. You'll get good training, real life applicable training, and it'll just make the day more fun. Oh, well, at least the night more fun in this particular case.